Hello out there, committees everywhere. This is LRock617 here with a 4-player arcade submission for the arcade version of the X-Men developed by Konami in 1992, also referred to in most circles as just X-Men 92. So this game is a beat-em-up, brawler, whatever you want to call it, released by Konami during a wave of other beat-em-ups that they were creating that were also based on third-party licenses. The interesting thing about X-Men was X-Men really didn't have that much of an aesthetic yet. They only went on a failed pilot called Pride of the X-Men to be able to design this game, but it ended up being cherished pretty well because it came out around the same time as the animated series and history was written. So in this game, the digital download edition for the PS3, which I am playing on here, is fairly interesting compared to the original arcade version through either a board or an emulator. A couple things to note. For one thing, you can only play between two different regions, those being JP, which is Japan, and US, United States. And you also have the choice between 4-player and 6-player. The interesting thing about that is there actually is no 6-player JP version of the game. So I think what they did was they wanted to base the mechanics of it on the European 6-player version, which is the hardest version of this game to clear, but they left the Japanese enemy set in. More on that another time, because this game has something like 9 or 10 different ROM sets, and they all play completely differently. But you don't get access to the 2-player JP version, which is important because that's the fastest version to speedrun if you're trying to do a 1-credit clear, which is what I'm showing today. The typical 80% speedrun of this, showcased on most leaderboards, involves a lot of death abuse, so you have to credit feed. I personally don't prefer to play that way. I prefer to try to finish as fast as possible on 1 credit. For this challenge here, I'm going to be submitting both 4P and 6P. This will be the 4P submission I'll be showing off. The 4-player version is actually a little bit slower. I think my PBs between the two is just shy of 2 minutes apart. But it's also not quite as difficult for the most part. The 6-player version is a lot harder because of the amount of space that's allotted. That space works for us in terms of speed because that allows us to scroll screens faster. But it also works for enemies in this game because they have a lot of really good zoning tools. But that's about 6P. This is about 4P. 4P is a standard 4x3 screen, playing it directly through a PS3, and I'm using a fight stick in this case, and I think it was my Itaki K-stick. So let's go ahead and fire it up here. Everything that you see on the screen was from a stream that I performed last night, except for, of course, the webcam, which is currently in real time. So we're playing as Storm. Currently not a position where I feel like I can offer a character donation incentive. Perhaps one day, but the other 5 characters all feature just a little bit too much in terms of being suboptimal. Most of them are very good for the most part. I think Nightcrawler's personally weak, but in this instance, even the next tier down of characters that I've been trying to play with, like characters like Colossus and Dazzler, who are also very good, I just can't get the consistency with them that I can with Storm. So for this submission, I'm just going to be going with Storm. Storm is very good. She is, if you play TMNT Arcade, she's essentially the Donatello of the game. She's not terribly fast in terms of her attacks, but her range more than makes up for it. Of relevance, in the Japanese version of this game, and the European version, you also get access to an additional moveset. Here's why that's important. You get moves that can be input utilizing command directions, diagonals, those being either up forward or down forward. In fighting game terminology, that refers to as a 9A or a 3A. So 9 direction is up forward, 3 direction is down forward. And I say A because that's the attack button. Storm's 3A in particular is the best attack in the game. It has incredibly long range and it's really fast. Probably saw it a couple times there through the first stage, but the first stage is really quick while I was talking about the other mechanics. So for here, we're just going to go ahead and take care of Pyro. Now, I will warn that this particular run is not deathless. There is one death featured in stage 6, which is probably the hardest boss fight for Storm in the game. I do have a longer run that's deathless, but that's before I decided to start adopting better grouping strats. Like, I decided to start using a lot better strats last night during my stream, and they all worked out very well. PB'd by a few minutes, so clearly I'm going to stick with those and just hope for more safety on things like that boss fight. So stage 2 is where things start to get not too much more hectic, but there are a couple more things we have to watch out for. Sentinels in this stage gain access to projectiles. They can shoot off rocket arms. It's their second worst projectile overall, but it's the only one that they have access to. We also have these enemies I refer to as Samuses, the gun-toting soldiers you see there. Saw some of those in stage 1, but we're going to see them a lot more prominently here. Didn't get away from that. Sentinel's jabs are really dangerous. Essentially what they can do is if they hit you, you are going to be comboed into a 3-hit string. unless you can directional influence out of it, referred to there as what's called DI. I believe when they tag you, there's a different direction there's a specific direction you can go in to get away from them, but determining what direction that is incredibly difficult, so I kind of just tend to pick one at random and hope I don't get hit. Doesn't always work out, but I do my best. Fighting 3 Samuses here is quite the challenge, but Storm's range more than makes up for it. There's a utility I call the option select that I wasn't able to show off there. It has to do with Storm's on-the-ground attack, which is one of the best in the game. I'll show that off here in a moment. Take out these turrets. Those guys are really annoying if you let them loose. That's the first time we use a mutant power in the game. In the Japanese version of this game, you only get one mutant power stock at the beginning of the game, and when you use a mutant power, it spends the stock before it spends health. Sorry about the follower alert there. And from there, you don't get another stock unless you take a death. So if we end up if we do end up taking a death, that's one advantage we get. I prefer to play deathless, but having an additional mutant power available to us if need be is not the worst thing. So under our stage 2 boss, this is Blob. Blob cannot play against Storm with the range that she has, and here you see the 3A being utilized to great effect. He just has such a hard time getting him past that, and also I know I mentioned before the range of it, which it is the best range ground attack in the game. The other thing to mention is how insanely good the recovery speed is. Like when she jams out the scepter and retracts it back, she recovers so fast that she can almost always combo off of it. It's really strong. On to stage 3. Big changes for this stage. Sentinels get a health buff outside of these specific Sentinels here. These guys still only take 3 hits to combo down. These Sentinels, however, they're referred to affectionately as the Mango Sentinels. They take 6 hits to kill, or 2 knockdowns. The only way you can kill them in 1 knockdown is with a throw. And I actually don't think I talked about throw yet. Throw is very, very good. There's no specific way to do it. It's just kind of determined at random based on what attack you're using and what distance you have. Utilizing Storm's command normals in those proximities tends to have them occur a lot more often, and that's actually good because, as mentioned, throws do kill in 1 knockdown, and they can also hit other enemies, so they're excellent for crowd control, but we don't have a lot of control over when we're able to use them. So I tend to just go for them as I can. These lizard men, I actually think, are some of Storm's hardest enemies in the game. She really doesn't have a lot of utility to bring out against them while they're on the ground. If they do the tail leap at her, her attacks really don't have a lot of leeway in being able to touch them before they touch you. So sometimes it's just a case of, like, if they jump at you, you just kind of have to press the attack button and hope and pray. Even her insanely busted 3A doesn't always hit it. It's a hitbox issue. They leave a little bit off the ground. See, it got there, but that's I was relying on that because I had him in the corner. With proper spacing there, it's not that difficult. But in general, I don't want to have to rely on it.
Whoa. Oh, whoa. No.
So I'm hoping to get a moment to talk about how option selects work. So with Storm, her attack is her ground attack, OTG, on the ground, Oki, whatever you want to call it, is the only attack in the game that hits on the ground that doesn't, like, register hits. It just generates damage. For the B fight, we just use our mutant power there. It's a sacrifice of 3 life, but it's worth it because the B fight takes quite a long time if you're not dishing out the kind of damage you want. Very unfortunate getting hit there. So we're kind of on panic mode for the rest of the stage. 3 life is fairly dangerous. Nothing can kill us until we get to the boss, but the boss is thankfully one of the easiest in the game. So 3 lizard men, not fun to deal with, especially for Storm. You also see me utilizing her dive there. I refer to every dive in this game as a dive kick, even if it doesn't actually look like a kick. Hers is just a face-forward dive, like she's jumping in the pool or something. That was unfortunate. Now I'm at 1 life, and any knockdown kills me. I can get anti-aired with a punch, I can get anti-aired with a fireball, and that's another thing the Sentinels in this stage gain. In addition to doubling their health, they also get access to a much better projectile. It's a plasma ball, just a fireball, Hadouken, that shot out of their wrist, and it goes really, really fast and has excellent anti-air capability. It's a threat. A little bit less of a threat in 4P than 6P, but you still have to be on the lookout. A little swag strat to go for here off the top rope. Tried to hit the lizard on the way in, but it didn't work that time. So here's how the option select works. We're going to be shocking them, and as soon as enemies come up to us, if we're mashing, we get to actually attack the enemies that are approaching us in most cases, but that is fairly timing specific. It's hard, and sometimes doesn't always work. Sometimes you just get hit instead, but it's generally worth going for, especially in corner situations like that. Now we get everybody's favorite meme. Always a classic.
You need to be careful here again. This part is just such a...
Not really sure if these enemies have a name. I just refer to them as guppies. They only have one attack, but it's a really dangerous one if you get tagged at distance. It's a 2-hit energy beam combo that when it knocks down, it does 2 damage, so it would kill us there. So Wendigo is, while he looks threatening, is actually one of the least threatening bosses in the game. He can't compete with range, and this actually works with any character. It just happens to work best with Storm. She doesn't even have to resort to her 3A. She can just do her normal side swipe, which is her neutral A, like I guess that's 5A in direction connotation. And he just can't get past it. There are a couple of things we're fearful of. Similar to Blob and another boss we're going to see later, Wendigo does have an invincible grab that he can actually get me with. The range on it is ridiculous, and the hitbox is way bigger than you think it would be. But I'm trying to keep him out. I can outrange the grab, but if I'm a little bit late on that and he got in, then he could have grabbed me and that would have ended the life. But we managed to maintain him. 9 cycles later, and we're moving on.
Blob, Nimrod, Juggernaut.
Stage 4 is one of the first real gates of the game. The stage is tough, the boss is tough. It's just a tough stage. It's very much one that you have to sit down and work with. I also don't know how I got hit there. I thought I had grouped them. Life is incredibly precious in this stage. There's just so many enemies that can just do such horrible things to you and drain your life before you even get to the boss, and you want good health for the boss. If you can get out of hand, you're going to have a hard time. So here we have new lizard men. Sentinels essentially behave the same as they did last stage. These lizard men, however, while they retain the tail swipe from the previous stage, they also gain access to a flame breath move, which is immensely great. Like that, there it is. That move is just awesome. It has really good range at the mid. It anti-airs very well. You can dive over it, but the spacing on that is really specific. I've only gotten it a handful of times. Definitely have gone for it way more than I should. I tend to take those guys out before I move on, because I don't want to have to fight 2 lizards while also fighting all this. Lizards plus Samuses is just asking for it, especially red ones. Go ahead and use this time to talk about the difference between the 2 Samus enemies. You've got red and you've got green, and they both have different movesets. The red ones have really good defense. They have a backdash that they can use to evade your attacks, and they also can fire straight on the ground. They also have a melee attack that the green one also has. So the red Samuses are incredibly strong when you have to fight other enemies, because they can control ground space. Like, you basically can't melee enemies at all if there's a red Samus on screen. Whereas the green Samuses, while they do have a backdash, they don't have the counterattack that comes after it. Didn't want to jump into the corner there. That was an input error. Big difference between the green ones, though. They have a projectile that goes in the air, so they have much better anti-air capability. So with the red Samuses, you can dive on them for in most cases. Green ones, you can't. Just fight them on the ground. Mini boss here, this robot bat. He actually just gets infinite in the corner with any character, which is really strong. Shouldn't be able to slip past this. There we go. Storm's actually kind of interesting for that fight, in that the fact that her attack is one of the slower ones is actually beneficial because it spaces out the hits. Because after you hit a bat, it actually has a few iframes after it takes a hit while it's in hit stun. But with Storm, if you just mash it, you're just going to get all the hits, because the fact that her attacks are so slow and have increased frames compared to most other characters means that you're just going to get to space them out, and the infinite is much easier. Granted, I had more fun doing it with characters with fast attacks like Colossus, but it is what it is. More guppies. These enemies never change. Every time you fight them, you're fighting them in the exact same thing. They have the same movesets, they just change colored skin sometimes. Got a lizard here. Pretty straightforward section here. We're just going to have a couple sentinels. From here, it's just top to bottom enemies. We're fighting probably at least 4 to 5 enemies in a given segment. That was really rude. I only wanted to dive to get on that lizard just to get, basically get momentum and proper spacing to be able to get an OTG, but they scouted it with that fireball. So that's your first time seeing the fireball, and now you see how big of a threat it is. It completely sniped the setup that I was going for. Pretty rude. Alright, so here we have a group of 4 Samuses. How I behave, or how I pattern this out here, is if I decide that my health is too low, which in this case I think it is, 4 health is pretty low, then I'll just attack them as standard like you saw there. Whereas if I have better health, then I unleash a mutant power, and that drains 3 health, but generally worth it to just take them all out at once. But we had a rough stage, so I went the grounded way. Put these guys all in the corner, use our option selects like you did before.
There we go. what's up, Dave?
Rest of the stage has pretty simple enemies. These sentinels are back to the original health of only having 3. So you can see this guy dies in one knockdown. That throw is insane. Just took out 3 enemies all by itself. That boulder sentinel is actually exclusive to this digital download version. Don't know why, but he actually turns that segment into a pretty big threat, as opposed to what you normally see, which is only the two guys at the lower plane. We're gonna kill these guys, move on to our boss. I do not want to contend with him while the boss is active. So Nimrod is tricky. Storm has the easiest fight against him because of her range, but there are instances where Nimrod can definitely outrange you because he has access to this laser move, and you really have to be wary of that. The other thing I tend to try to get against Nimrod every time I fight him is the high ground. Because of Storm's 3A, even though the range is good, it doesn't hit above her sprite very well. It hits below her sprite incredibly well. So I want to make sure that I have the above plane pretty much every chance I get against him. So it turned into a good fight. Not too shabby.
Storm can't outrange him, but laser is real bad for you. It wouldn't have killed me, but it would have caused.
He's not wrong, you know.
Down, put me at 1, and gave him momentum.
All right, stage 5. No sentinel upgrades here. I think their outfits here are a little bit cooler. Their bodies, whatever you want to call it. I love the colors. This is the first section where we get introduced to these holes. Do not fall in there. You lose a life. Losing a life in this game is really bad, especially if you're trying to 1cc. They had a pretty good segment there. This section is really dangerous because I don't want to scroll the screen just yet. I want to try to kill these sentinels before we have to scroll the screen, because we're going to have all these turrets pop up here. Get that red Samus out of our way before we take out these turrets. I tend to take out the turrets just for the noise reasons. Like, as long as you leave them active, they're just going to make all kinds of sounds, and I just prefer not to have that.
I also think Psylocke could be a good addition for a game like this, but I would not put her in over any of those 3.
From here, we just got a few enemies to fight while we walk our way to our first actual voice-acted mini-boss. Like, we had the bee in stage 3 and the bat in stage 4, but this is a boss that we'll actually see recurring at some point. This segment's pretty tough. Two red Samuses just trying to flank you. Not optimal at all.
It's the most degenerate thing.
Yeah, I have noticed that about red Samuses. If they get up on occasion, they'll just shoot it. They'll just shoot their bullet right away, and it's really hard to react to. The other thing to note about the JP version compared to the US version, when you knock an enemy down on US, they can actually despawn from the screen, as in fall off the screen. In JP, the walls, the sides of the screen are a barrier. They can't actually go beyond that. So Emma's interesting. Takes 3 hits for a knockdown, just like her previous bosses.
That's an adjustment of what I'm used to.
But at this point, Emma also has iframes that she can gain. I believe she gains her iframes in cycles 3 and 5. Because what I'll do is in cycles 3 and 5, I'll hit twice and then swing a 3rd time, knowing she's gonna invincible through it, and then I immediately move down, then come back up and hit her. Well, and as a whiff punish.
If I'm playing, like,
took out those little drones.
Like on MAME or whatever, they happen.
Got a few Samus to take care of here. Scrolling forward here would be a real problem. Like, we are gonna have more enemies to fight, but trying to take care of more of this with 3 Samuses on screen is just asking for trouble. So that's a safety strat.
Mind cluing in what they
Can't save time if you're not supposed to move forward, right?
Last year's list was good, though I know a lot of people got.
You think like, oh, well, I could save like maybe a minute by scrolling forward here, but I have to take all the enemies out really, really quickly, and every bit of behavior in this game is super random. It's just constant dice rolls. So maintain what you can. This game gets a little out of control, so maintaining control of whatever you actually can get control of is massively important.
She or Beast could be the powerhouse of the group, but just don't let Rogue fly. I mean, they don't let Storm fly.
Good grouping there. Really started to try to utilize it a lot more. Storm's kick is her combo ender, and that move is actually really good.
The thing I hate is that they would change.
Has a really good hitbox. That was rude. First damage I took all stage, so I guess I'm proud of that, but that was just very degenerate. Dude just pops in and just throws a shot. He wanted that free throw, I guess. Okay, so here's a little bit tricky. The Samuses are guaranteed to flank because they spawn on both sides of the screen. I took that just so I could kill the red one. I really didn't want to get hit, but I think it was worth it.
What's better for one person may not be better for another. Like, you like cable.
This game really, I described this earlier in the run, and I don't know if it was overheard or not, but one thing this game likes to do is, in order to be able to knock an enemy down, you essentially have to combo them.
I've never
as in like hit. But what enemies in this game are programmed to do is come after you while you're on X number of hits of a combo. Like, they love to be able to just hit you out of, like, either the third hit or right before the third hit so they can just completely erase what you were trying to do. Because if you drop your combo, you can't get as much damage on them.
He can kill me with 2 attacks.
The combo really comes down to how fast you're able to maintain hits. Anyway, for this stage, we've got this last little wave of Sentinels here. Take out that guy.
I figured so, given the title.
Now we have Juggernaut.
I normally like to hit him at the start,
Juggernaut's an interesting fight. Storm, as similar with Nimrod, does have the easiest fight because of her range. Similar to Nimrod, you also want to maintain the high ground. Unlike Nimrod, or Juggernaut does not have a throw. I didn't talk about the throw much during the last stage because the throw really doesn't do a lot against Storm. Like, Nimrod just never gets in. His laser is the only attack that matters. Whereas with Juggernaut, he has 2 attacks that are bothersome. He has that charge, which is incredibly instant. So what I tend to do is circle around to the left and then back up to try to get him to charge the side. That way I can set him up for a combo there. Did it again. It's a total bait. It doesn't always work. When it works, it's great. If it doesn't, then I can just keep him to the right and do this instead. His other scary attack is his gun, which is really, really fast, and they both do 3 damage. And when you have a 10 max health, 3 damage is a lot. Like, you actually have to consider that. That was scary as heck. Stabbed him out of the charge. That's not common to have happen. The charge isn't invincible, but it's so fast, and the hitbox approaches really quickly. Good fight, though. Move us on to stage 6. For my money, this is the hardest stage in the game for Storm. It's a very short stage, but everything you have to deal with in this stage is real difficult. First reason is because Sentinels now have increased health. You can still kill them with a single throw, but you know, you won't always get a throw. A throw has a cooldown period. Knocking them into the pit is nice.
Please die.
Do that. The other reason it's hard for Storm, to me, is because of the boss. But we'll get to that. Screen scrolling here, very, very important. That bridge is arguably the most dangerous thing in the stage.
What are you gonna do?
You do not want to scroll this in properly because you will get swarmed and it will be bad.
Good throw.
So here I want to go in and take out this turret. What I'd like to do here is keep enemies on the right. That way, they're not going to be able to do anything to me. Pretty tough to be able to maintain that.
There's so much that can go wrong.
Wanted to dive in. Unfortunate about what happened there. I really didn't want to scroll the screen, but I think going after him was correct. But I think I was actually proven wrong, so I'll probably be sure to look out for that in the future. That throw was incredibly lucky. Like, that guy fired a shot, and I just rolled a crit. It just didn't happen. So being at 6 here is not good. I will not lie about that. Reason being, we actually have to spend a mutant power in this stage. We didn't have to spend one in the last stage, and I think that's maybe the first stage where I just don't spend one at all. Well, no, stage 1, but stage 1's short. Stage 5 is just not important. If you're feeling frisky, you might be able to try to take out like a full wave of enemies, but generally, if I'm at certain health totals, I don't tend to bother with it. I just don't know how that grades past me. Just mistakes happen. To pin them in the corner.
I do not know what you mean by that.
So from here, we're just gonna see groups of these types of enemies, and they're all really tough. You have both types of Samuses, red and green, and then you have these Silver Sentinels who not only have access to the degenerate fireball I was discussing earlier, but they also have increased health. It takes as many as 3 knockdowns to kill them if you're not able to throw them. They are a problem. And coupled their zoning with the Samuses, it's rough. So here for this Pyro section, we're gonna go ahead and mutant power. Way better to spend that 3 health than it is to not to allow that to happen. Those guys getting on screen is pretty rough. They have, I think, I want to say it's 3. I think it's 3 cycles of knockdowns to die. But a mutant power just takes them all out right away. Real unfortunate I took that fireball there for the death. I thought the death was on the boss, actually, but in any case. As I mentioned, stage is hard. These bone breakers that we saw in the last stage aren't going to be too bad. As soon as you pull them up to the wall, you basically just get to take them out right away. Last segment of white sentinels here.
Like, don't be in their line of sight, but the thing is, it's random. Like, sometimes you can be in their line of sight.
Alright, here's our boss. For those who have seen the Bebop and Rocksteady fight in TMNT Arcade, this is about what you're getting here. So this is the living pharaoh. Pharaohs, I suppose.
especially with like
The two that are spawned at first are just clones. They're actually the weaker version of what you see in the middle.
essentially Sagat's
But they make up for that lack of moveset, which they can only do that move, that Sky Swipe, which has incredible range, hitbox, and a lot of iframes, especially after the hitbox is active.
iframes.
So it's only one attack, but having to fight two at once is a juggling act. Like, you very much have to multitask here. Your range helps. Personally, I prefer to have characters that have faster attacks. Like, I love this fight with like someone like Cyclops or Colossus or Nightcrawler, because they can just get in and just smother him. Storm and Dazzler have a bit more work to do. I did not know what happened there. Sorry about the wordy dirt, but that was frustrating. It's rare to see them have iframes on wake up like that, but I definitely got stuffed. So anyway, for this guy, we're just gonna make sure we can space him out. One other thing to note about this fight, for the first two enemies that you fight, for the first two pharaohs that are there, it's actually really important that you take them out as quickly as you can, because if you take too long to defeat them, the third one spawns anyway. Like, there's a set duration. I don't quite know what the duration is. I'd say it's somewhere probably between 90 seconds to 2 minutes, probably closer to like 90 seconds. And he spawns, and you have to fight all three at once, whereas you have two basic ones and one overpowered one. The reason he's overpowered is just because he gains access to more moves. He has like eye lasers and stuff that have more iframes and really annoying. But yeah, having to fight three of those guys at once, as bad as two is, having to fight three is just tantamount to disaster. You don't want it.
I see you lining up. Okay. That's the thing you got to do.
Yeah, turret clipped me there, unfortunate. Turrets are, I think, the biggest worry in this stage until the boss rush. Nothing else is really all that hazardous, but if turrets have really timely shots while trying to dive in, then they get to block that. It's a trade. Not good for you. Gold Sentinels retain the same stats of the Silver Sentinels from the previous stage. They have really high health. They might even have higher health. You saw I just electrocuted that guy while he was on the ground and just got nothing out of it, it seemed like. They're also scurrying up to make sure they can get their hits in. Hop kick there. Didn't mention earlier regarding Storm's moveset, her hop kick is probably the worst in the game, but it does come in use sometimes.
Storm basically has everything.
It's like the one thing in her toolkit that's not very good.
And everything else is amazing.
Compared to someone like Colossus or Wolverine who have just completely busted hop kicks.
I think on the US version, her dive attack sucks.
A few segments of bone breakers. These aren't too bad. Best thing you can do is just make sure they circle up similar to the previous stage, and then do something like that. Missed that one, unfortunately, but we can let him move back around. We could have also gone for a dive kick strat, because those do really good damage against those guys, but they can also anti-air that if your timing is off, so I tend to not go for that. So anyway, approaching our boss rush. We have one mutant power stock after eating that death in the last stage.
Can be really dangerous at times.
Not much to talk about with the Sentinels here. They're basic enemies at this point. They're the last standard enemies we're going to see through the rest of the run. So we have our boss rush. In the rest of this room, we have 6 bosses to fight in a row, one of whom is brand new. The first 5 are all refights that you can actually choose to fight up to 3 at once if you want. Something tells me that if you're pro mode, that's probably faster, but I have never actually attempted it. I think the most I've fought at once is I have fought 3 at once due to a mistake, but the most I've fought comfortably or confidently at once was 2. Unfortunately, I got hit by the grab there. As mentioned, their grab is disgusting. If you go back and replay that, you can see how the hitbox on that worked. It was invincible the whole time, too. Like, it's a problem. The other thing to note about these bosses, until boss number 6, is that they all have reduced health. I believe Blob only takes 5 cycles compared to his previous 9, and I think it's the same for Wendigo here.
Sometimes you have to.
Same thing goes for Emma, who's after this. She normally takes 6. She takes 6 cycles in her previous fight, but here she's only going to take 5. Emma's a tough one because my goal is always to push her to the left so I can put her in the corner.
Are you serious, game?
But she tends to spam that backswing blow that she was just utilizing there. Like, she loves trying to get you with that. But if you can get her against the corner, it's certainly not free. You do have to make sure you know where her iframes are, where your hitboxes are. But it is the easiest path to make sure you can finish the fight without too many scuffs. The downside is if you go in and try to hit and you miss and you commit to staying there and she does connect you with a backswing blow, she knocks you forward to the right and spawns Nimrod, then you have to fight them both at the same time. Not good. Do not recommend. Nimrod's about the same as before, except it's a little bit harder because he doesn't have the wall against his back. Having that wall was actually a really big deal because keeping him against that wall means that he doesn't really have a lot of space to move around. Plus, we can't move him forward because we have one more refight after this. Solid fight, though. Then here we have Jugs. Similar to Emma, I like to get Jugs over to the left. This way I can just do this, making sure he gets parallel to me. Wake up hit on a Juggernaut is essentially free because he doesn't have a throw. Any of the first 3 bosses, well, first 4 that aren't Emma, I guess, have access to that throw, and they can beat any wake up hits that you throw. But Juggernaut, like, you can just pretty much hit him willy-nilly. Take him out that way. Here we have our brand new boss, the legendary Magneto. This is a complete spacing battle. Mystique only has 2 attacks. Sorry, I just gave away a spoiler there. Magneto, Mystique, has 2 attacks. She has a left cross punch, which is not scary at all. It does do really good damage, but it's incredibly slow, and if I get hit by it, it's my own fault. Whereas that kick that you just saw not too long ago, that move is terrifying, because it does 3 damage raw, causes hard knockdown, and she can combo it on you if she knocks you into the corner with it. Like, if she knocks you down and then walks back up to you and kicks you again on wake up, you can't beat that. They can just take away the run. Thankfully, Storm's range is enough to beat that. Grind that out there. Still have our stock going to the final boss. I don't think that the mutant power is really all that necessary for the Magneto fight, but it's a nice crux to have. So here we have Magneto. First thing to note about the fight, anytime shield is active, you can use a mutant power and it will disintegrate the shield. It doesn't do damage to him, but it gets rid of his defense. That was actually kind of funny. I had to laugh about that. I hit him once, he goes into hit stun, tries to iframe, and then just shields instead. Shield is a really dangerous move to have to contend with. It does 2 damage when it hits you, and of course it leaves him invincible the whole time while he's airborne unless you spend a mutant power, and I just still don't have any interest in doing that. From here, similar with Mystique, I kind of want to just circle him to the bottom, just work his way up. He does still have access to the 2 melee moves that Mystique had, but they're not quite as dangerous. The kick does do more damage, but he has to combo with it. Like, if he kicks you just once, it doesn't knock down. He has to combo 3 kicks into each other to do 4 damage, as opposed to Mystique's 3. But the fact that Mystique's knocks down on first hit is really, really threatening. Magneto also has access to this fireball. As long as you can space it out and dodge it appropriately by moving up and down as a proper sidestep, you can beat it. But it is a very threatening move. It does 4 damage. And I believe the one he can do from the air does the same, though that one might only do 3. Similarly to most previous boss fights, I prefer to have the fights. I prefer to have the high ground here because her 3A is just amazing, and it just stuffs Magneto mostly by itself. Moved back too quickly, so I took 4. That was unfortunate. It happens. Bust out shield just cause. Another thing to acknowledge about shield, he can shield out of hit stun. Like, if you hit him, he can shield basically right away, and you can't respond to it. If you're close enough, he does hit you. Storm has the least likelihood of that happening due to her range, but it can still happen. He can also do it on Wake Up, which means Wake Up hits are not free against him. It's a very annoying move, and how good of a time we actually have in this run really comes down to how much he's willing to use and abuse shield.
Should be it, though. Yep.
And that'll end the run. From there, it's just make sure you get your melee hits, and I think the proper time there was a 30-28. It's on the last hit, but still a good run. My previous 1cc on this category for this console was like a low 35, so adapting all of those strats that I incorporated for better grouping worked out really, really well, and Storm's just great at that. So
some mic volume adjustments. Thank you so much for the GG.
That's going to be X-Men Arcade. Hope this is considered. It's a classic. Everybody knows this game. I feel like every time I stream this, someone comes in talking about who their favorite character is or was in the game. So, it's a hot one. People like it. It's fun. Reminds them of a time gone yore. I'm also going to be showing off the 6P run in another submission, so you all can get an idea of what to look for in both. But as for this one, gotta say I love the credits, and especially the music. The comic panels are really, really cool.
This ending theme is so hype.
The only thing that's weird to me about this edition is that if you're playing on an arcade cabinet or board, when you beat the game, the end credits give you the announcement of the game is not over yet, so you actually can loop through the game. Like, you can actually start a second loop of the game. Whereas here, it just goes to a game over screen. So from there, I just went ahead and exited out. And we'll be going to 6P runs for the next one. But again, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, and hope this will be up for consideration because this game is awesome. I love playing it. I love showing it off, and Storm is really busted, and she's great. So have a great day, and take care.